folks another minute or so just to get dialed in. I've got the agenda slide pulled up for those who are kind of interested in kind of what is the scope for our May profiling, our last profiling call in May. I'll get the chat going just so that if you are interested in, we had a pretty in-depth call 2 sessions ago because our last Friday was off, but 2 sessions ago on invariance. And so I'm just going to put both the YouTube playlist and then the second one is our like baseline materials, those links into the chat, because sometimes it is helpful to have like some of those like more technical walkthroughs. If you're ever interested, it's on the playlist. But it's about 2 minutes after. I see we've got more folks that have joined on. So I think we'll probably kick off into the regular, the portion of today's call. So housekeeping. So I know some of you may have seen there's that update on the the Info Central forums, a few updates this week on submission of any feedback for the latest round of the V0.2 core profiles. I submitted mine earlier today, but if it's something that you're interested in submitting, Ken, I know I just saw you join the call. If there's like any further details or like links to how to submit feedback that folks may want, throw them in the chat. Feel free to speak up. I didn't want the deadline to kind of go unnoticed if folks hadn't been checking the forums or getting those updates via email.
Right, yeah. So thanks for including that reminder. So yeah, today is the deadline for any feedback. The link there should link to the spreadsheet for submissions. So yeah, look forward to people's feedback. Really, the core profiles are intended to reflect what's been published as part of CAI's Pan-Canadian Health Content Data Framework. So nothing there should be particularly surprising. It's really meant to map what they've defined in their data model as FHIR profiles.
And just some of the logistic, like, so I had mentioned earlier, I put in some of my personal submissions today, and some of them around like the baseline were like, make sure that the new simplifier URL is there and like a heads up about the canonical URL for the baseline profiles changing. So we have some coverage there already, but you know, I think it's still helpful if there's anything that in your past kind of reviewing the profiles that are out there to kind of provide that feedback. I know there'll probably be another cycle in the near future, but just that heads up. The other topics, the main like topics for today's discussion from a profiling perspective, I wanted to follow up. We did sub-value set creation on our last session, and had done a little bit of like QA following it. So we figured like follow up on that topic just for closure and to make sure that we can merge it in, package up. We had actually a pretty good invariant review last session because we're going through some of the items in the community issue log that are more QA focused and that are resulting in like errors or warnings in our QA report from the CA baseline build. And there's some items on there that we might have choices on. Do we want to do it this way or do we want to do it that way? So it'd be helpful to kind of return to that piece. And I think there's one application question that we can also discuss today. There was also a QA item, I should probably put others here, that was really interesting for us to kind of review. And it was around iGuide parameters. And there were updates to the iGuide parameters that like the code system. And so, like Elliot pointed out on our last profiling session, that there's actually quite a lot that's available to us that's really helpful for iGuide parameters. And so I thought as part of like just the regular cleanup, it might make sense for us to also kind of take a peek at what's out in there and like whether or not there are additional IG parameters that are helpful to us, like comparison parameters or validation parameters, that kind of thing. So that's what I have, like, other than, you know, other community issue log items today. Is there anything that folks want to make sure makes it on the list for our profiling call that we don't see on these focus areas? All right, so we will jump right into it. Okay, so let me find my mouse. somewhere over here. Here we go. Sub-value sets. So I know it's been 2 weeks since we talked about these last. What I wanted to do was just provide an update that we've applied the sub-value set immediate approach that we discussed over the last few weeks for the value sets that show up in practitioner role. We know eventually that the baseline canonical is going to change, but we wanted to have kind of an immediate solve for some of the additional kind of noise and issues that our implementers were raising, specifically with non-resolvable value sets. So they have been created for this. At the same time, I also just put in a really quick adjustment to another community issue like QA ticket Elliot had put in, which was just to add that experimental value of false. Elliot, I see you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, just before we dive right into that, I believe we've got Interpol on the call. If I recall correctly, we had an exchange on Zulip about the use of the stub value sets. And so I'm wondering if they could present what the issue they were running into is, and it might feed into some of where this discussion is going.
Yeah, Interpol, do you want to, I can give
Um,
you screen share, or we can just kind of speak to it against some of the stubs?
I can speak to it. I unfortunately I'm not prepared to present it because I don't have the exact error message up, and I don't have access right now to the terminology service where the issue is occurring. But I can definitely I can speak to Joey and we can demonstrate it on a future call. But otherwise I can speak to it and explain kind of what was going on. So on the gateway, what we normally do is we pull the value sets that are on the terminology gateway service and we convert them. We have a job that converts them into FHIR value sets, and we adopt the version of the value set that is found on the gateway. So if it's in a date format, for instance, we'll adopt that, and then we'll load that into our terminology server. Where we were running into issues is on the implementation guide packages from FHIR. The particular client that we were working with also had stub resources or stub value sets created. Yeah, so they had value set resources that were on the implementation guide, and the version. So here you see what Sheridan has on the screen. You see a subset version that's a date. But the value set version on those value set resources from the simplifier packages, we're using semantic versioning, so they had like a version of 1.0, 1.0.0, etc. So both would get loaded to our terminology service, but if, for instance, something was changed, so if a value set was changed and it got loaded into our terminology server, because the version formats were not consistent with one another. They were not actually, our terminology service wasn't actually able to recognize that, hey, these two are the same value set based off just the canonical. It was looking for the version as well, the subset version. And when it came to validation, so when we were performing validation of, let's say, FHIR resources or FHIR payloads that we were attempting to validate against the particular value set, we were receiving an error, so a severity error, and I apologize, I don't have the exact wording of the diagnostics, but it was something along the lines of you have two value sets with the same canonical, and it didn't know which one to evaluate the code against. So that's the gist of the issue that we had, and I apologize, I didn't come prepared on this call, but we could demonstrate it maybe on a future call.
Yeah, thanks. I didn't mean to put you on the spot there.
No problem at all.
It's actually, I'm glad that you did, because actually, well, because one of the questions I had when I was so I pulled this up just to give an example off of like what it might look like. But one of the things that I had come across also when I was doing like the stub value sets and adding experimental into some of our established baseline stubs was whether or not date mattered at all either. So like our stub value sets in the baseline don't have this convention. Actually, they don't have the version number. Like, and so, you know, I think one of the areas that beyond just ensuring that version isn't present in our stubs that we're curious to see like if it would create the same challenge would be dates, because that is one thing that I think one of the value sets had. Like in your testing or Interpol or anyone else's, like did you identify like any challenges with dates as well?
No, it evaluated the date, so it would look at the dates, and if it's a future date, and it would take that and update the value set based off of the future date. Same with the versioning. If they incremented the version, if we don't increment the version when we make a change to a value set, it doesn't actually make an update in the terminology server that we were using. Sorry, does that answer the question
I think
that you're
so.
asking?
So like
Okay.
let's say that our date, if we had a date in the value set in the baseline and it was, I'm totally gonna mess up my like, let's say it was, because we published this one a while back, let's say it was 28, right? And then something, because it's the daytime formats. That if our stubs did have this information, it wouldn't be as challenging in terms of resolution, because that is one of the things that folks are like, the tooling often knows to say, oh, well, I'll go with the most recent one. And oftentimes, like if we're publishing in the baseline and we don't have frequent releases, our dates do eventually become out of date with what's in the terminology gateway. I think it's probably not going to be too much of an issue for us, but I was just curious, like, it sounds like that isn't the same resolution challenge that around versions that you're having.
No, the date would, like, I don't think it would take the date into effect, although we can perform a test just to see what happens. It was actually the date was used as the version, and if the version did not change, it wouldn't make an update, or if the versioning was inconsistent between the two, that's where we were seeing a challenge. But we could try testing with the actual date field and seeing if it makes an impact.
Yeah, I think it's like it's like helpful information for like implementers, because I know we're not going to be the only ones like that are using the stub value set. Ideally, obviously, we're not going to be using it for much longer, but it does help us know kind of if there are places in the baseline also that we need to kind of roll things back. The good news is, at least for the sub value sets that are in right now, we don't have version and we don't have date. So I think that should at least sort us for what we've identified so far, but it is, I think, a really important call out for any of the guides that are currently using version stubs.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I see that Zulip chats in the thread. Thanks, Carl. So on that front, I just wanted to make sure I'm going to pull up the PR, and then we can look at the PR together if there's anyone who's interested in kind of reviewing the changes that we put in from the stub value set so far. So the way that we typically work is you've got kind of like whoever is the submitter of the change, and then we have a second reviewer here. So I submitted right before the call to get the change to add the experimental and for the new stub value set creations. If we ever want to review like what's in the commit, like you can see like the only other item I guess is here is just adding something to the ignore file. But you can see what we've done is like we've updated some of the special parameters to like open them back up for some of the value sets that are not officially published in our stubs needing to be identified so they don't issue errors that the canonical doesn't match what's in the guide, as well as changes to kind of include that experimental edition. So, oh, and then I guess this one has these two, I guess, have the date removals and replacements with experimental. So we can keep the dates, we can remove them preemptively, but it would be helpful for if there's someone who wants to take a look at that, take a look at reviewing it, and then we can kind of close out the ticket for at least the stub piece, because I think there's some other things that we have kind of in the works that we're trying to separate from the stubs as well. Are there any questions on that? Anyone want to raise their hand just to review that real quick? All right, I'm going to ask again if it's not reviewed by the end of the call, because it should be pretty simple. So on that front, this change, because ultimately, like when we were chatting 2 weeks ago, we were looking at, you know, what's a kind of non-meaningful bug fix that like might, well, I should say, when we were discussing kind of the stub value set additions and changes that we were putting in, what we were trying to do is like isolate, these are the things that are clarities of intent or clarities of like needing to have content that was the same expectation, the same constraints, but just communicated slightly differently, falling under this kind of like bug fix, potentially 1.1.8. We can, once it's pulled in, we can package as 1.1.8, or if we want, we can also put in like the invariant QA fix that we started working on 2 weeks ago. And just like, I'm guessing that's when we would call it a 1.2, because that actually is more than just a clarification. Do people have a preference? Do we want to do 1.1.8 packaging and then do 1.2 packaging? Does it make a difference?
I think it's fine either way. Like we'll wait for the 1.2.
Okay.
But if somebody needs the 1.1.8, then.
So like, we'll wait if you do feel like you need 1.1.8 and you don't want to consume the changes and improvements to the invariants, let us know and then we'll package separately. Otherwise, I think we can probably put it under 1.2. Assuming that that's just a general overall improvement that most people would like. So going back to the QA invariant, I'll put the original issue in the chat. And I think I mentioned at the beginning, we started to discuss and kind of troubleshoot. We played around with one of the tool, or two of the tools actually, for FHIR path checking. And we ended the call basically saying, okay, we're going to trial 2 distinct approaches to the FHIR path for an item that we kept getting kind of errors on, like the syntax. And interestingly enough, we thought that one approach would error and one would not, but both came back as not introducing any new errors. So we thought it might make sense to review those at the top of the call and then maybe discuss which ones we want to pursue, which of the like modeling options, because it comes up in a couple different places. And then there's another invariant as part of like this overall QA that we might want to have a look at in the allergy space. It's an application on a slice. So but that might be kind of interesting to go through. All right, let me just dig into that actual invariant on allergy real quick. So the one that we were using the FHIR path tester last week to evaluate was these two, or I should say the 2 that we were using were these 2. So these have been moved up to resolve the underlying issue, which I'll bring that up for folks once again. Should be this one. The underlying issue was, it was saying, basically it was seeing where we applied it, and then in our FHIR path, we were adding an additional location in that wasn't necessarily required. And it wasn't expecting it based on where it was applied. And so we've moved it up to where it needs to be. And I'll just show you the 2 options for modeling that we were trialing. So it's a different invariant, but ultimately it's like like they are very, very similar in their mechanics, but their fire path expression is slightly different. So in the first one, we actually included the actual resource, so allergy intolerance coding, because this is spanning multiple elements. So it's spanning code and it's spanning verification status. And then the same is true for here. It's spanning verification status and code and type and category, it looks like. I don't know. I was expecting that this one would error for some reason because it's like duplicative of what's being asked. But when we look at the actual remaining kind of QA items for allergy, those two invariants that were introduced, neither of them are showing up here, which would, to me, imply, and after doing the fire path testing on both, that both are valid. Is that what other folks are reading as well? And if both are valid, do we have a preference on which one we would, like, do we want to call out the actual resource if it's applied here? Elliot, I think this was the one that you were like proposing that we trial out.
Yeah. I'm surprised the first one doesn't have an error. Did you try both of them with Brian's FirePath checker?
We did. We can run through the exercise again just to like, hold on, let me actually, because I know that there were going to be folks that probably didn't get a chance to see it. So here is something to bookmark. So if we pull the actual fire path, let's pull this one, because I think this is the one that is the most questionable.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to pull it in. We are going to put the fire path here. Oops. And we're going to give it the context of, which I think you told me I could do in trace. What was the context application?
Don't know that you need to give it a context.
Okay.
And then you need the example.
Hey Sheridan, I'm looking at the FirePath page on build.fire.org, and it says the full resource name is optional at the beginning. So that's
It's
not airing out.
optional. Interesting.
Okay.
Yep, so that's probably why they're both valid.
That makes sense. So we'll just run it just real quick, just to confirm. So this piece,
No errors.
no errors, and it's met because I think there is a verification status. Oh, I guess it doesn't matter because the condition isn't met actually, in this example. So considering that both are valid, do we have a preference? Because it's going to show up in a bunch of places. There are a lot of places where we put an invariant that would be like a condition that would be true that has to consider two distinct elements that would be applied at this top level.
I would lean towards including the full resource name just for clarity, but yeah, that's just myself.
I see Eric had mentioned the second one is easier to read. So this one, probably because it's distinct from everything above it, is like one of the things that my eye is drawn to. Any like, Ken, you're like, you think it's just for clarity? Like, do you feel strongly enough about it to say we should be consistently using this one?
Don't feel strongly enough to, you know, not a hill that I need to die on.
Can you scroll to the right so we can see the whole,
Yeah, actually, let me do,
or turn on wrap? All right, so either you have a coding from null flavor or the verification status exists. Am I reading the first one right?
no, sorry, no, so the first
first
one
one.
is where you have a null flavor. Oh yeah, no, that's what, so this is what this is saying. So it's an either or statement. Which might be another thing to consider. Because that's a very strong statement. Basically, what this one is saying is, and tell me if you read it the same way, that you have a verification status, and the only condition in which you wouldn't have a verification status is one where you have a null flavor in code. Which is interesting, actually, because when I looked at the no allergy one here, it was originally applied before the change on a slice. So like, this is a very strong statement to say, you know, the only scenario is that you wouldn't include a verification status is where there is a null flavor in the code, but it might also be that we have to look at where it was originally applied, that the goal was to say within a certain slice, this thing becomes conditional. Let's take a look at what the original one was. We can look at the delta.
Yeah, because it puzzles me that that should be conditional on a slice, but let's look.
I
So-
think there's, go ahead.
This is just the location I've got pulled up here. So 173. Go ahead, Elliot.
You're checking in both of these system equals blah, 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 value set null flavor. You shouldn't have a system of a value set. So that I think is an error in both of them.
So let's see what we had for the null flavor. So this is the, okay, so it's coming from this, right?
So that's the system. You, I guess, copied the line 5 or 6 up from there,
This guy.
which is the value set.
So my read, and again, it's been, let's see. I think it's probably been 2 years since this has been touched, is that when we moved, it's like it's twofold. One is the syntax has to be updated to include a system. But two is that in moving the location to resolve the QA error, we might also be changing the underlying expectation for when it's supposed to occur. So if I look back at let's just take a look right now on what's on the baseline master file. Okay, so this is the current allergy intolerance. I think it's called no allergy, but yeah. So originally it was applied here. So here's no allergy. And the other one was not asked. So no allergy is being applied within the slice. Not asked was also applied within the slice. Okay. So we were trying to resolve the error by bringing it upwards, but I actually think we missed the context on what the constraint was originally supposed to have, which was it is supposed to be applying conditionally when this, well, what should be the system is populated. Does that first statement make sense before we talk about what would be swapped in for the second statement? Do folks understand what I mean when I say like the conditionality? Yes, no?
No,
Okay.
not sure.
So, so the invariant was originally applied on a slice. So, like, it's being applied here. And it says, if you supply a code that has a no flavor, then these things shouldn't be present. When it got exported up, so this is the not asked, when it gets exported up, it changed the interpretation to it has to be a no flavor or these things. And then the same would be for like no allergy. So with this one, it's when this system a code from this system exists, then oh sorry, it's not a no allergy, it's too many invariants on this profile. It's just regular allergy that we're looking at. Here it is. Okay. So this is being applied. This one's actually applied on code. So maybe maybe we have to look at this independent of the slicing choice. So I can revert the changes that we made because they haven't been pushed. So I can just Control Z them and we can look at actually correcting both the system as well as the application. Would that be easier for folks?
I think so.
Let me, I'm going to copy it. So I have a copy of it. I'm going to make a new file, drop it in there, and then I am going to revert our changes. All right. Then I'm going to reload it. I'm going to get rid of all this text. And we're gonna look at it from scratch. Okay. So I'm gonna gen once in the background, so we actually have a clean view of the world right now with this resource. So we have a error of this expression saying we don't understand allergy intolerance as a potential value for CA baseline allergy. So it doesn't like, where's my code? It doesn't like this invariant here. And it doesn't like it because it's being applied to code. But it targets two distinct elements. So it targets code and it targets verification status. On top of that, to Elliot's point, it can't really actually be evaluated because this where system requires this to be a code system, not a value set. So I think that's the first change that we want to make. So the value set, no flavor. Let's just make sure if this is a combination of code systems or a single code system that contributes to this value set. Well, I'm glad that we reviewed this because actually there was one on the allergy intolerance slice that I also had a question on. So I'm glad that we're correcting this. All right, so it's null. I'm guessing it's going to be the V3 code system, but we're going to find out. I might also just be able to do this. This guy up. Okay. Looks like it's pulling from that, but we'll just double check as well. I don't know why that subset is delayed there. Anil, do you know, just while we're waiting, that no flavor value set, is it constrained to just the code system V3 no flavor?
I think it is. If you want to see it, try incognito mode, because sometimes when there's a lot of us are making calls on this right now.
Yeah. Let me see. Oh, it's gonna make me log in again. 1 second. Okay. Okay, yep. So it's just this code system. And the reason I asked was because like if the value set originally had multiple code systems, then we might have to get a little bit more special with this where statement, but it's a single code system, so we can make that swap. And we'll make the swap in the X path as well. Okay, so first piece is done in that the incorrect reliance on the value set for system has been changed. The second piece is its location. And so right now it's located on code, but we know that we want to ensure that it gets located upwards on allergy intolerance because it's targeting two distinct elements, verification status and code. So we're going to take the constraint and we're going to pull this one upwards, knowing that at least right now we said it applies to code. And I don't think we've added to verification status. Okay, doesn't look like it has that reference to the constraint. Okay, so we're going to add it to here. We're gonna bring it up. Okay. And the change that we know that we want to make is, we're gonna remove this from the expression. And we don't have to change the X path right now. So now we have what should be a compliant and a compliant fire path expression. We'll save it, we'll run it, but the next question that I think we should have is this too strong for what we had actually, what we intend and what we intend moving forward? So I'm going to run the publisher just to confirm the statement is that this actually is a correct fire path. This says right now, where putting system, okay. So basically, this is an either or statement, which is no flavor exists or verification status exists. When we read the human interpretation, it says verification status shall be present if this code has a null flavor concept. So there's another correction beyond just making it valid that we'll want to consider. Because our human expectation, at least my understanding is, it doesn't actually align to the strictness of how we've written our fire path expression, but we can test it. So if I go, I've got this guy here. And basically, what we're going to do is we're going to remove the verification status from our example. And this is going to help us confirm whether or not we've written the fire path so strict that if verification status is missing and it isn't null, it's not considered a conformant resource. So I remove the verification status. I'm going to play it. It results to false. So false meaning the condition isn't met, that it's either a null value or verification status exists. When I put it back,
What is the code right now?
Sorry, with the code?
Allergyintolerance.code. You scroll up?
Yep,
Where is it?
right here.
Right, okay.
So if we were to swap this out with a null value, let's just, for the sake of the exercise. Let's just say NI for right now. Okay, so we've got our example. We showed that this evaluates to, like, it isn't met when we remove verification status. Let's change this to NI. And I don't think we need a display. So this is if there is a null value in here, but there's also a verification status. Let's see what happens. What we want is for this not to be false. I'm gonna guess it's gonna be false.
It should be true. It's
Yeah.
But it's an either or, right?
it's not an exclusive or. They're both
Oh, it's not
valid.
exclusive or. Okay. So that would mean that even if we remove this, it should still remain true, which it does. So we know that this piece works, but we have to figure out how to actually make it more in line with what we're saying here, which is if this is null, then this applies. Is there I'm just trying to think within FHIR path, I don't think we want our or statement. If that's what we're hoping to have occur, right? Do we have a good alternative to or?
Either
Implies.
implies or if, yeah, either way works.
Okay. So if we change implies, then let's take a look at our example. So we've got a null value. And we no longer have a verification status. So if this is accomplishing what we want, this will result to false because we're missing when one is present, the other one is not. Okay, let's see what happens when we add in the verification status back. So meeting the expectation results to true. Okay. Is there anything else before we plug
Hold
this guy
on
back
here.
in that we have to fix?
Shouldn't that be verification exists false? Or not?
Well, let's take a look at the description. So
Shall be
shall be
present.
present if the code is a null flavor concept.
Ah, yeah, okay.
So we like this one. Should we see how IG Publisher deals with it?
Sure. There is a very subtle challenge, which is you could have multiple repetitions of coding, one of which is null flavor and one of which is not. And it's not clear to me what we actually want the behavior to be.
So let's just try an example of that real quick. So let's just say that this is going to be this is like my example organization, and it's going to say example. So a second coding that we can supply. Verification status is currently present. Should we try it with the removed?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure I know, yeah, it's going to evaluate to false, but the question is what is the desired behavior in this case?
So if we were to talk about the human description, is it if A? Well, it says if the code represents a null flavor concept, which so we could
You really
mean like at least one coding or all codings.
and theoretically, it shouldn't mean two completely different things if you've got multiple codings. I think we're fine with what we've got. But it is a subtlety.
Yeah. So like where if you were anchoring to an invariant to a specific code system, the repetition can sometimes matter if, for instance, you want it to perform differently if there were multiple codings available. Does it change our XPath at all? This would be implies here.
I don't know XPath. So I can't help.
There's not a converter here.
Come on, Brian.
Yeah, you've already helped us so much. Let's take a look. I'm going to try it. I'm just going to put implies and I'm going to see what the publisher does after that. All right, so we're going to run this guy again. All right, so when that's running in the background, let's take a look at our other one. So our other one was not asked. So this is applied within a slice. And within the slice, this is the rule that we're looking at. So if the code is a null flavor, like what we just looked at, then one of these or all of these shall not be present. So we know that we have to change the location because it's applying to multiple places. We know that we have to change the null flavor, so we can make that change right now. Let's see, 1 second, where's my guy? So we'll change our null flavor right off the bat. We'll bring it up because we know we want to make that change. And then let's talk about if there are improvements, oops, to the overall. Oh, my computer's working hard. I can feel it slowing down. Okay. Oh my gosh. Sorry, my publisher is just messing with my computer right now. Okay. So we know we want to bring it up. I'm just gonna drop this guy here for a second. I'm gonna pull this guy in. I'm gonna make this here. So I'm making all the changes that we made, just like we did for the last one. So it has that fix. Now let's take a look at the expression. So we're gonna make this change because we can. Okay. So where coding is this and it exists, it implies that the status does not exist, exists not, meaning like this cannot happen, and type exists not, so type isn't present, and category exists not, so category and criticality exists not. So
Good
go ahead.
with all of those except for the verification status. Is that not directly contradictory
Yep.
to
It
the
is.
first one?
And they're hard errors, which means that like truly prohibitive and preventive. So let's take a look at verification status, no flavor. So we have two potential pathways. We could remove verification status, or we can be more specific about what it is in verification status, if that is what, like the intent. I don't know if that is the intent based off of this description. Because you can confirm, let's take a look at what's in null. So there might be some that maybe wouldn't make sense. Oh, sorry, let's look at what's in verification status. That's what I wanted to look at. Unconfirmed,
where we-
repeated, or entered.
Do you know where we got that constraint from?
I don't, like, this probably would have been something from the original clinical stream. But that would have been like 4 years ago.
Hmm. I'm betting this goes back to the first revision of the repo.
And so while Elliot is looking at that, would we anticipate that an allergy that was sent with a null value potentially could have unconfirmed, confirmed, refuted, or entered an error contributed to it? So maybe we'll look at no flavor again. So if this has no information, or it's actually probably a less common one. Let's say asked but unknown. So I'm making an assertion that the allergy, like I asked them if they had any allergies and they said, no, none that I like, not that I know of. None that I know off the top of my head. That would be an allergy intolerance statement with an ASCII code. I think it's very feasible to say, okay, like I confirm this once again at like when I was entering in the information, and therefore it has a verification status of confirmed. I think there's probably a workflow where it's refuted, maybe even unconfirmed, like if this was something that like maybe a patient entered into their patient portal and it was a record from that location. I'm not sure about entered an error, but I think that is enough scenarios where we would say verification status shouldn't be prohibited from a null value. Does anyone feel like that piece is incorrect? So would disagree with removing this from the invariant? And then if we remove that, we'll be left with clinical status, type, category, criticality as a, if you give me a null flavor, don't give me these. I think clinical status would make sense because none of those would actually be relevant if something was asked, but they didn't know of any allergies. I'm guessing the others are as well, code, type, and category. If we make this change here, do we want to pick up on like any further changes to this one at our next profiling call? I know there's at least one other invariant we have to change within this, but like we can also continue our review of this one as well. Does anyone think that we don't want to end up doing that? If so, what I'll do is just remove this guy and save where we're at. And we'll go from there. All right. Have a good weekend, folks. We will pick up next Friday with our governance call, and at our next profiling call, we will return to reviewing the allergy invariants. Cheers. Thanks.
Great.
Okay, see you.